Yeah, we're live. It's I'm a little bit late, 7:06 or something like that. I was just over trying to get the thumbnail shot over of the trophy four cylinder was not cooperating. It's done a lot of that lately, but the good news is it is back together. I stayed late last night and worked on it today. I got it actually back together around, I don't know, noon or one, I think. It everything takes time, and when you're doing that, like I had to redo the cylinder head, so we had to take the valves out, clean all the valves. Unfortunately, the wire wheel decided it wasn't going to be working anymore, which is the thing that I kind of use to clean off all the wheels. What's going on with our? Oh, there we go. Um, and then I wanted to lap all of them in, and some of them were pretty bad. So it took multiple times with the Super Ritchie razor blade rebuild with the drill and lapping compound, which is all that I had. That's what I had at my disposal for the machine shop back there. So I did all that. We put I got all the pistons out, ball honed all of the cylinders. Obviously cleaned off all the bearings and all the nice thing is all the rod bearings look good. A few of the rings were actually stuck in the pistons, and this is an interesting story. I think you guys will really like this. The guys that are here already, that this thing had the leak down was terrible on this. It was like leaking down 85%. So it's not that it only had 15% leak down. It had 85% leak down. It was only 15% good. And what I did was on one cylinder, I took the piston out. The ring was stuck. I unstuck the ring. I wanted to get new rings. We ended up getting new rings, but I wanted to try the stock ring. So I ball honed that cylinder, unstuck the ring and cleaned the piston out and stuff, and then put that back in, oriented the rings and put it back in and checked it. And it did get better. The leak down was much less in that configuration, but it was still bad. And I was wondering if that maybe running it, normally because it's a brand new crosshatch, it's an old ring. If we run it, it should help it a little bit, and it certainly will with new rings, which is what I ended up putting in. The interesting thing, and the thing that I want to tell you guys about, we know now why the leak down was so bad. When I was a little concerned when I got the new rings. We have a ring squaring tool. We use that. We put them in, and I ended up testing the ring for ring gap at a couple of different depths down in the bore. So we used the ring squaring tool. I just used bolts. So I used a bolt and put the edge on the deck surface, and then mate the ring up all the way around so that it's all even, and then check the ring gap at various different depths. And in this case, I didn't have to check the depth, because when I checked the ring gap on the new rings, it has like 35 or so thousandths ring gap, which is kind of on the border of too much. It's a wrecking yard motor or an old used motor from the 60s. I'm not going to be worried about it. I'm going to run it like that. But the interesting thing is when I eventually pulled the piston back out and checked the ring gap on the stock rings, I thought, well, I've hit a home run here because the ring gap on the stock rings was, are you ready? 126 thousandths. I mean, you could slide your hand down in between there. So I thought, well, that's got to be why there's so much blow by on this thing. It's because it has 126 thousandths ring gap. I mean, I kept having to double up and triple up my feeler gauge just to get it up big enough to where it wasn't just wallowing around in there. I'm like, that's the most ring gap I've ever seen. I thought for sure that I don't know, I put it in a trough in the cylinder or something, that it was uneven. It was, again, the ring squaring tool is pretty simple to use. I thought maybe there was a big groove where I put the ring, so I moved it in different spots. But 125 thousandths. And the weird thing is, or maybe it's not weird, it was roughly the same. The top and the second ring both had that much. And I know that this motor, we know from the ridge on the top, that it has a lot of cylinder wear. And I just measured the top with the, we know that this was a standard bore originally, because we know that where there's no wear, it's a standard bore. It's no longer a standard bore, obviously. And so it's got to be quite a bit bigger, but not that much bigger. I mean, this thing didn't wear itself 100,000s. Actually, it's going to be wearing not 100,000s. It's going to be wearing whatever 127 divided by pi would be. But it's worn a lot. And I thought, okay, well, great. Now we know, because even with those rings, the leak down got a lot better after I honed it and fixed and I did both of the valves in that cylinder on the cylinder head as well, and that seemed to help quite a bit. Then what I did was after we took the piston out and measured the ring gap, I put the new rings back in, the rings that have only 35,000. So that's a big change, you know, from 127 to 35 or 36,000 ring gap. That's a sizable change. I thought, wow, we're going to see like blow by, or not blow by, we're going to see our leak down test like in the teens, you know, maybe 20, but certainly in the teens. No, it didn't seem to change it at all. So I'm scratching my head about that. I don't know why there's that much leak down. The one thing I did notice is now when I'm doing leak down, and I also try, because I want to see what's happening when I do something a little bit dynamic. So I'll put a little bit of load, like I'll raise the piston up and I'll push on it. And obviously the leak down gets a little better like that. But I do notice now that it seems like there's more air now coming out past the valves than there was before. So what I'm thinking is that those are still bad, but that because there was so much, you know, air leaking past 125,000 ring gap, that there wasn't enough pressure pushing against the valves, which are also leaking and are also bad. So now they're leaking more. I don't know. It's all speculation. What I did was decide, like, I'm not going to worry about this anymore. I ball honed everything. I put the new rings in. I did everything that I could. We ran through several sessions doing with the polishing compound or lapping compound to try to get as good a valve job as I could on the Super Ritchie razor blade rebuild. I got a new head gasket and put the new head gasket on, torqued everything down. Everything's put together. We'll go over and take a look at it. The other thing I did is on the inline 6-cylinder, the 292, I had previously installed a 1-barrel to 2-barrel adapter to allow me to run a 4412, you know, 500 CFM Holley like this one. I'll show you right here. Like this one, so I can run this or the OG one, or this one is actually a quick feel. I also have the Holley version. In fact, that's what I did today. Is I did a video on the flow bench comparing, like, I don't know, 8 or 9 different carburetors. So we had 3 versions for that video, which I'm editing right now, and you'll probably see that before you see anything on the Trophy 4-cylinder running. But I did 3 versions of this. There's a quick fuel version, there's the Holley version, both the 4412 XP versions, and then also the original Holley version, the one that so many circle track guys and stuff have used, and they modify it by removing the choke horn and all that stuff. So I flow tested this one, the quick fuel version, the Holley version, and the OG version. I also ran, because I had an adapter to do it, we had actually an adapter that was designed to test Webers that they had made way back, and nobody's used it for years and years and years. But it just so turns out that the 1-barrel carburetor that came with the Trophy 4-cylinder is that same-ish bolt pattern, and so I was able to put that on and flow test the 1-barrel carburetor from the Trophy 4-cylinder. I also ran a number of different 4-barrel carburetors. I ran a 650, a 750, and a 950. And then I also, in the 750 version, I ran both the HP or XP versions, and then one with a choke on it, which was a brawler carburetor. So I flowed all of those. A lot of these, like the 2-barrel ones, I flowed at 5 inches and at 14 inches. I flowed all the carburetors at 5 inches. I know that they flow. And the reason that I did that is that I'm doing this video is because whenever we see a rating for a carburetor, 650 CFM, 500 CFM for the 2-barrel, 600, 650, 750, whatever for the 4-barrel stuff, they flow them at different depressions. So what I wanted to see is, what do these things actually flow when you flow them the same? Like, I don't even care what the number is. I just care that, okay, we flowed the 650 and it did this, and we flowed this one and it did this. And the interesting thing is a lot of these carburetors, like all the 4-barrel carburetors and these 2-barrel carburetors, all had the same throat size. They all had the same bore size. The 950 was bigger, but the 750, 650 were both the same. These 500s were the same, and yet they flowed differently. And as you might imagine, the choke horn one flowed less than a non-choke horn one, and it's all just, you know, it's all just not magic. One of the interesting things is this quick fuel version, and I'm not going to tell you why, but this quick fuel version, which is the same as the 4412 Holley, same company, flowed less, and then it didn't. It flowed less than the Holley, and then we were able to figure out why it didn't flow less, why it was flowing less, and they were able to fix it and make it so that it flowed the same like it should. So that was a lot of fun getting all that stuff done. I also flowed, when we flowed this, we flowed it on a 4.5-inch bore, because we have a bunch of different, you can see here. So we've got a bunch of different inserts, a bunch of different inserts for the flow bench so that we can flow different bore sizes for, you know, for different heads and chambers and stuff. So we flowed that on I think it's a 4.5-inch bore, and the reason that I did that is because the sealing O-ring for that would seal on the like a 4-hole 4150 carburetor spacer, which we could use on there, and then put the carburetor on there, and then we could clamp it down, and then we would get no leaks that way. I could also use, which is what I did, which he started it with, is I used a Keith Wilson 2-barrel to 4-barrel adapter to flow all of the 4412s, and I think that's what it is. Yeah, 4412s. Flowed all of those with that, but I also flowed the adapter by itself, and then I also flowed just the 4.5-inch bore, which even at just 5 inches is way more than that machine will flow. So that wasn't a restriction. And then the 2-barrel adapter, even with no radius entry on it, which it needs, outflowed the carburetor. So it was not restricting, because I wanted to see if they both flowed exactly the same, which they were very, very close when I flowed them at 5 inches. When I flowed both of them independently at 14 inches, then we start to see a bigger difference in the flow rates. So the adapter outflowed the carburetor, which is what you want, because you don't want to limit it with the thing that you're trying to flow it through. And so I flowed the adapter, and then the carburetor and the adapter, and then all the other carburetors. And then obviously we took that off and flowed all of the 4500s through an open 4500 carb spacer, basically, because it would seal perfectly on the O-ring that's there. And then the Wilson spacer also sealed perfectly on there. And when we started all of this, obviously, like you always should do, when you're flowing this, you want to make sure that you set the machine up so that there are no leaks. Because you can adjust for what, you know, if you're flowing heads or something small, you can adjust for 1 or 2 CFM worth of leakage if it's coming by the spark plug or the way that you have everything set up and sealed, and maybe it's not perfect, maybe it's coming by the valve and stuff. So you can adjust for that. But this thing sealed up perfectly. I put tape over the plate and clamped the plate down, and everything has gaskets and O-rings on it, so there's no sealing and no problem with sealing the structure itself. And so we made sure that there's, you know, we started out with something that didn't leak at all. And quite honestly, with what we're flowing, if it was 1 CFM, it wouldn't make any difference, because as soon as you open all that other stuff up, it's like, oh, well, this is much easier to get through here than it is through whatever tiny little, you know, flange orifice that it was trying to get through. So it worked out really good. Let's we'll take a walk over, and I guess I need to get a poll up here. So okay, will the stock Trophy 4-cylinder make more than 150 horsepower on the dyno? That's assuming that it runs. I guess I'm getting ahead of myself. So we'll go over and take a look at that. Slow bench, slow benchy. Wall, wall. Okay, you're gonna come up here. So as soon as I get off here with you guys, I've got that editing to do, and then I want to see if I can get this motor up and at least make some noise. I just want to hear it. I just want to hear it bark. So here is our completed trophy 4-cylinder, and is the first thing you might notice is, hey, Richard, what carburetor is that? How come it doesn't have this, like, you know, the one you just flow tested? Whoa! You can see I already have the necessary adjustments with zip ties to keep the choke open. I don't know if this works. we're going to see. It's pretty dirty, but I checked the fuel filter and stuff inside there. That all looks good. So I'm going to put fuel to it, see if it leaks, see if the accelerator pump works. And honestly, even if the accelerator pump doesn't work, it's not a big deal as long as the jetting and stuff are working. But as you see, speaking of 4412s, this is the Holly one that I flow tested. And the reason that that can be on there is because of this. The famous 1-barrel to 2-barrel adapter. I had to do lots of machining over here, make the hole a lot bigger, do a slot. You guys will like what I had to do on the to slot that thing. You know, you want to use a rat tail file, so I put a rat tail file in the drill press, and then with the rat tail file going through that hole, and then I could just get the drill going and move the thing up and down and angle it and stuff to get the necessary slot that I needed, and that worked out good. Right now I was just cleaning this stuff up to get because we had to take the thermostat out because we don't run that on the dyno, so I don't have a gasket for that, so I'm going to silicone that. I did manage to get the correct water pump, and big shout out for Mark Sanchez who made that happen. He did all the magic digging on the internet. I have the water pump pulley, which works good. All of this is working. I found a belt now to work there. I got the other exhaust manifold. We were just working on the points are all set up, so now I can hook up the distributor. And we found a coil for it. Thank you, Ish, for finding the coil, because the coil that's on the dyno is not going to work. I'm hoping that all the lifters are going to cooperate and all that. So it looks like, you know, we'll see. I've already got a oil filter for it over there. That's not on yet. I took the pan off, you know, obviously to get all of the connecting rods and get the pistons out and stuff. I had to silicone the valley cover. I couldn't find a gasket for that, so I siliconed that up. You know, for the dyno, even if it leaks a little bit, it should be fine. But this carburetor looks out of place compared to that one. Honestly, I'm hoping that this runs and works, and then the other one can also go on. And this is our fancy swing valve. It's a little loosey-goosey. That's a I think that's a quick spool valve in the making. So all that's working out good. you know how we do it, fingers crossed. So tonight we can talk about carburetors. We can talk about the Super Richie razor blade rebuild. All of that worked out good, ish. That thing wanted to fight, and I still do not understand. I took Brule over there. I showed him. I said, have you ever seen a motor that has this much ring gap? That's like all of it. That's like the 90 pounds of boost ring gap. You know, I understand, and it makes total sense that much ring gap would cause the thing to have terrible leak down. And also the other thing that would cause it to have terrible leak down is the fact that the rings were stuck in the bore, which I had to clean the ring grooves out quite a bit. One of the things I noticed is the depth of the rings are different between the ones that came out and the ones that went in, but they were going in. This was happening. So that's not exactly right. And I'm thinking only on the top ring that they were a little bit different. What I'm hoping is that all the buildup that's behind the ring will more than make up for it. But thing spins over nice. Like I said, all the bearings were good. I cleaned the pan out a lot. It had a lot of, like, I don't know, gray stuff in there. It's old. What I'm hoping is that when I spun it over after putting the rockers and stuff back down, I cleaned the rockers off really good, cleaned the push rods out, made sure that they didn't have anything in them, put the rockers and the, the little pivot balls in there, cleaned those really good, and made sure that I lubricated those before we put them back in. So again, I'm cautiously optimistic. The water pump is the same as the 389. The water pump that I got from AutoZone the first time was not correct. It had some sort of leg on it. This one is just round, and it's again, thanks to Mark, we got the right one. It's working out good. They really rated a one barrel at 1.5 inches. Yeah, these things, it's amazing how little that these things would flow. So somebody take a guess on what I flowed all these at 5 inches, and I flowed some of the 2 barrels also at 14 inches, and then I did conversions for 28 inches. They flow a lot at 28 inches, but if you have 28 inches of depression on your carburetor, it's time to get a bigger carburetor, because that makes them flow a lot. So what do you guys think what do you guys think at 5 inches? No, did we float at 5 inches? I think I floated at both. I'm going to grab the sheet here. Oh, no, I take it back. I floated. Because the one barrel carburetor doesn't very much. So I flowed the 1 barrel Trophy 4-cylinder carburetor at 14 inches. So what do you think that flowed at 14 inches? It is a 1.568 bore size, obviously a single one. So what do you guys think it flowed at 5 inches? How do you figure out this? How do you figure out the swing and oil pump pickup? I don't. I mean, it's a stock one. That's the way it came. That's not going to be an issue on the dyno. I think I remember the guys telling me that. I think the other trophy guys told me that you should just make that fixed, and you should just do what we normally do. That's just measure the depth off of the floor. Yeah, the Pontiac 194.5. It's half of the 389. At 14 inches, this thing flowed a whopping 155 CFM. A whopping. It's a lot. Did you pack the oil pump with grease? I never took the oil pump off. And you don't need to pack it with grease because it's not new. It's old. It's full of stuff already. Piston Junkie, what did you win? 140 CFM. You're 15 CFM off. RS stands for Raleigh Sport, right? Yeah, some of these conversions for 28 inches are a lot. They're way more than the flow rate of the carburetor. Although it needs to be pointed out, and this is something that I obviously will point out in the video, that people talk about wet flow all the time. But if the carburetor is also, through those bore sizes, having to flow fuel, that's going to displace some of the air. So the actual flow rate is going to be lower because we're just flowing air. If you have to flow both, it's not as much. How do you decake the oil out of the lifter valley? I didn't. I just sprayed it off. Can you just pack a mod motor oil pump from the inlet, or do I need to crack mine open? Did you not? You should have put oil in. If it's a new mod motor pump, which is a gyrotor pump, right? You should have filled it full of oil and spun it around before you installed it. This is not a quad 4 by Oldsmobile. This is a trophy 4-cylinder. It's dramatically different. It's not a 4-valve motor. It's not an overhead cam motor. It's just a 389 Pontiac, only half of that. With half of the motor, half of the power, but with 2/3 of the weight. The rocker area was cleaned. I just sprayed it off and used some gas and some brake clean and stuff, and then use the air nozzle. Yeah, Admiral, you don't want to ever put a dry pump in. It may not ever catch. It'll just eat itself to death. And it's going to wear the. I think that's an aluminum housing, right? It usually wears the back of the aluminum housing. Mike, where did the trophy motors come in? They came in Tempests from 61 to 63, and they came with transaxles in them. Yeah, this motor had been heated and you know, it's a 61, so it'd been run for a long time. It's a little bit black inside, but you know, you just got to do it. You read the poll wrong. Let's take a look and see how our poll is doing. Will the stock trophy 4-cylinder make more than 150 horsepower on the dyno? 68% saying yes. I like the enthusiasm. Stock, but with the turbo. No turbo yet. $125,000 ring gap, road draft ventilation tube. It has that too, and it has the carb heating tube as well. Scott's in the house. Everybody learned that the Tempest had independent rear suspension from my cousin Vinny. Oh, you blend. The Tempest motor, this trophy 4-cylinder will get boost at some time in its life. Because the came low compression had all the goodies, excuse me, the turbo. The more powerful ones came with higher compression. Are we running it on the dyno tonight? I don't think I could get it on while we're all still here. I'm going to try to get it up tonight and just make it have start and make noise and hopefully have oil pressure. That'll be till late. There'll be enough blow by to run the turbo. Well, then we'll just hook the turbo up to the road draft tube, right? Can you do ring gap with using all the original bearings and parts after taking it apart? I don't know what you mean. It has ring gap in it already. It has 36 thousandths ring gap in it. And I did put it back together with all the original bearings. Do you know that Ish is a Pakistan word for teacher? Ishmael is? He definitely teaches us stuff. He's good. He's a good guy. He's good peeps. What's the factory horsepower on the Trophy 4-cylinder? It ranges from 110 up to 166, depending on which one you get. I read recently that the torsion bar drive shaft in a Tempest smooth vibration from the big 4-cylinder. I know that they put a giant flywheel, and I was told by one of the viewers that the flywheel that I have actually is for an automatic that didn't have the holes in it for a, you know, a clutch or a drive plate for us, but a clutch for a normal car. You should have grabbed one of those Mini Cooper turbos at the junkyard. There were some good ones there. There were 2 turbos, and then there was 1 supercharged version. It has 36 thousandths ring gap with the new rings that are in it right now. You have to put a quadrajet on it. That's not what came on it, but we could. I just don't have a quadrajet manifold for it until I put I can run a quadrajet on there when I put the Edelbrock intake manifold on there. So I think, who's I going to borrow one from? Oliver. I was going to borrow one from Oliver because I think he showed me a couple of quadrajets when we were there working on the Nova. Can you get a camshaft for it? Yes, I'm told that a camshaft can be made for this thing. Yeah, it needs a quadrajet on it just because the 400 one worked out so good. I kind of wish I had one of those 400 stock Q-Jet cast iron intake manifolds for the Pontiac. I don't have another one of those in that because the other one went on the motor. What cam and lifters are in the Trophy motor? The one that it came with. Ooh, you're swapping a K24 and a Fiat X19? That's a perfect combination. Have you ever tried gapless rings? Yes, I have. I'm going to run the 800 CFM quadrajet on the Trophy 4-cylinder because it'll make more power, right? Can't you use a 4150 to 2-barrel adapter and then use? Yeah, I can stack adapters like I did on the 292. Eventually, we could get to a 1050 if we wanted. This thing makes power fairly low. I doubt it's going to make peak power past 5,000 RPM. After tearing an engine down to gap the rings, can you assemble the engine with all the original bearings and parts? Yes, we do that all the time on all the junkyard motors. They don't get any of that stuff that's new. They don't get new fancy stuff. All the bearings, if the bearings are in good shape, we check the bearings. If the bearings are bad, then we go, well, this might not be a good one to boost. But normally they're all good, and we just reuse those. We reuse those. We reuse the original rings. We just put gap in them. And then sometimes on 1 or 2 of the big bang motors, I think we ball honed it too. If Billy makes a cam for you, that would be a good field trip video. I'm not driving back there. I mean, it would be good to fly back and see. I would love to see Billy because he's good people. It would be interesting, but it's just going to be a V8 cam core. Got to start putting quadrajets on everything that we run. I think that Westech only has 1 quadrajet. I think it's an SMI quadrajet that they have here. Daniel, where did I get it? I found it online. I found it on eBay. The V8 intake will fit on this, and you just have to cap the other side. Oh, I'm sure the bore is out of round on this. I'm sure it's wavy wall. I'm sure it's oblong. I'm sure it's bigger than it was when it was stock. All of those things are wrong. It really needs to be bored. It needs to be bored, and I'd like to see it surfaced too with a smoother surface so that we could I don't know if they probably make MLS gaskets for a Pontiac, I would think. You know, head studs, and then you could run boost on it, or more boost. Did you buy the other Trophy 4-cylinder? No. Gapless rings will blow the second ring off of the seat and lose compression. What are gapless rings? If there's no gap, will they seize when you heat up? The gapless ring is a misnomer. They overlap, and so there's room for them to move and grow without touching each other. They don't go like this. They go like this. And it's not, you don't want less gap. I mean, look, 126 thousandths or 27 thousandths or whatever my wiggle test was. Yeah, this is definitely another guy's combination. The thing that I wanted more than anything out of all of this is I wanted to find some Pontiac blue paint. I couldn't find any because I want to spray paint this thing. Freiberger and those guys are coming over to shoot Engine Masters, I think, next week. And so that would have been a good one for them to look at. '88 Speedmaster could send you one of the Pontiac heads. They're looking to see if they have any CNC stuff ready. I don't know if they do, but I'm getting intakes from them. And I'm also getting a set of 165 roller rockers too that I want to try on here. Because I don't have a camshaft yet, but that will be it'll be some kind of upgrade. Yeah, Dean, the rotaries did have 4 barrels on them. I was surprised. My friend had an 81 RX-7, a GSL, and I remember opening the hood and taking the air cleaner off because I wanted to see what it was. And I'm like, dude, that's a little 4-barrel. Are you putting the Trophy 4 in a car or truck later? No, I'm not. Yeah, the blue paint, it was very common. I thought that there was a bunch here, honestly, but there isn't any. And I looked at Napa didn't have any, and the local auto parts stores didn't have any. I think I'm going to order some from Summit. I know Summit has it, and I've got to order a gasket set anyway because it was a little bit of a nightmare getting gaskets for this thing. Even though it's not just getting it because this is a specialized 4-cylinder that nobody has. It's a Pontiac. Nobody had stuff for Pontiacs. So you're not seeing how a dual plane V8 manifold will work? Well, let's go get one. Man, this thing is still dusty. Well, let's see. Let's see if it will work. So we got this Edelbrock Performer. Womp, womp, womp. So this side is going to feed, that side is going to feed that one and that one. This side is going to feed that one and that one. I'm going to show you. This side feeds that one and that one. And this side feeds that one and that one. 4-barrel. Wah, 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 wah. Cap off this other side. It's all good. And it would work even better if you had an undivided, if you had a cut down in the wall there. The older Pontiacs, that's right. The Pontiac guys will know that there is definitely a difference in there are two different shades of the Pontiac blue, the early and the late. Dallas, you pulled the 428 Carburetor heads. You had ground the air injector bosses off the exhaust port. So you had ported the exhaust. Is that what you're saying? Yeah, I've never seen. I've never seen one of these run, but when you look on YouTube, there's stuff on there. "20 inches and 40 inches. That's a lot. You're going to see some really big flow numbers when we convert that stuff. Do the air gap perform any better or worse than the standard performers? The air gap is going to be an RPM, so it's a different design manifold, and it's supposed to be much better. It always is in the other stuff. I haven't tested this versus an RPM specifically on the Pontiac yet, but I hope to. They only made this engine for 3 years. You should use an intake for a 64 or older Pontiac V8, or maybe you can drill the bolt holes on the newer style intake. I wanted to put a tri-power on there. Everyone's told me that the air gaps are better on the Pontiacs than this one. Made less power than the stock one did on that 400. It admittedly is not a super powerful 400. It was only 340 or 350 horsepower, but the stock cast iron dual quad or dual plane manifold made more than this one did. But I'm told that the air gap or the RPM is at least the equal of the factory one. Miguel, we tested one in UTI and it made 48 horsepower, 94 foot-pounds. What motor are you talking about? Not one of these. They're rated at way more than that. Yeah, Jim, we know that the intakes are different because the head is different, but I could put a different head on it. In fact, I have a set of pistons and rods over there that have the dual valve reliefs in it. There are videos of these engines running 10 seconds or better. There are videos of Nunzi's car running 11s is the one that I've seen. Pontiac wasn't the only one to do half of a V8. International Harvester has done that too. I don't know. I haven't tried to line up this intake manifold with that on that head yet. I've never tested a sloppy stage 3 cam, and the reason that I haven't done that is because it won't fit in a stock 5.3. There's not enough piston to valve clearance for that camshaft. And so that means that, the only people that could use it would be somebody that has valve release or who have cut valve release in their stock pistons. You ever tried a Performer versus a Performer 2.0 in a big block? I don't think I have. Not that specific one. I have done on a 5-liter, on a 302 Ford, I've run the Performer, I think it was a Performer 289, and then the air gap, and then a Torquer 2, and then a Victor Jr. all in the same combination. I haven't done an Iron Duke. I was looking for those when I was over at the wrecking yard. I didn't see any though. Did they ever make engines with the other halves? Yeah, the Ford has the Mercury guys have that what is it, 3700, 3.7 liter or something with the big block Ford. Well, I'd like to build one of those just because you could, you have a good cylinder head you can put on there. I realize your elbow's deep in the Pontiac. What happened to the FE? I don't have an FE. I might have access to one that I can run, but it's not mine. It seems to be raining Pontiacs because the 350 will be tested. This one will be tested. And Liv called today and said, you need to come pick up this 6-cylinder. It's not a Sprint, but it is the overhead cam 6-cylinder. It just doesn't have the whatever makes it a Sprint, a 4-barrel intake manifold and a cam and compression or whatever. Richard, you need to measure the big end width. Are you talking about on this Pontiac? I wouldn't change rods on it if that's what you're talking about. I have more Magnum stuff coming. The Super Duty Iron Duke ran very fast in many comp eliminator classes. Used to be a swamp buggy in Naples, Florida. That's powered by some kind of 350 4-cylinder. There is a 4-cylinder version of that, and I thought that Scat did those. You need to find an Oldsmobile Widow. Pontiac 6000s. Magnums get no love. I got nothing but love for the Magnums. I got one that needs to run. I just have to swap the. I think I already swapped the pistons over. I think we might have already done that. What valve guide material would you run for a max effort land speed or silver state setup? Well, a land speed effort would be different than a silver state. A silver state, if you're running wide open throttle for 30 or 40 minutes, that's a different thing than making a pass at Bonneville. But for LS stuff, I like powder metal guides. The Magnum is going to get the UT Awesome camshaft in it, so I can get him his intake and throttle body back, and then a regular 4-barrel Edelbrock intake manifold, a couple more cams. I'll run boost on it too. So an SS3 would work on a 5.3 if it wasn't stock. Well, I don't know what you mean by work, but it doesn't have enough piston to valve clearance. So if you have pistons that have valve reliefs in them, like aftermarket pistons generally do, and there's enough piston to valve clearance, you can run that. It's not a camshaft I recommend, but because I haven't tested it and I don't know anything about it, I don't even know what the specs are in an SS3. I just know that it's too big to fit. And in my opinion, even the sloppy stage 2 is a little on the big side for a 5.3. Have you ever done and tested a 4.7 Magnum engine? I haven't. I did see one in the engine over at the wrecking yard though. Did you get aluminum heads for the LA engine from Speedmaster? No, I don't have an LA engine. I have a Magnum. Richard, do you want to test a 4.9 liter EFI upper with a side draft Weber bolted to it? And send me a picture of that. I really like the EFI intake manifolds just because that's a 2-piece, so it lends itself well to doing some weird stuff with it. I bet this half of a 389 with a Holley EFI should make 200 horsepower. The Holley EFI won't change the power at all. In fact, if you do port injection on this manifold, it will make less power than the carburetor does. According to my info, they only built 429 Cobra Jet and Super Cobra Jets in 71. Okay. I think the email address is up on the channel too, but so there it is. 350 cubic inch 4-cylinder was an inline motor. Wow. I don't have a favorite engine. I just whatever the next one is that I get to work on. Scat was a V4. That's the one that I remember. I've seen a couple of those. Dallas on the Cobra Jets and the Super Cobra Jets, they were still high compression in 71, right? I know Ford hung on, like with the Boss 351, they hung on to the compression even in 71. I am a big fan of the B16. The email address though was the name of my road race team. I'll let you know if the Trophy 4-cylinder is a favorite one for today or tonight or maybe early tomorrow if it runs. John, ever put grooves on the sides of Gen 3 LS pistons to run aftermarket rods with floating pins? I've never done that. You don't really need that for 1,000 horsepower, though. We've done lots of 1,000 horsepower Gen 3 stuff. That's just stock wrecking yard stuff. And Gen 4 stuff way beyond that. Seems like a lot of work to put an aftermarket rod and use a stock piston. I did. I actually saw ARC. I saw a couple of Thunderbirds at the yard that I was at. In fact, I saw 3 of them, and they were 68, 69, and 70, I think. Did you run the factory water pump in your 5-liter in the Silver State? I did, and the story that I tell about that is that it would overheat if you ran it in 4th gear. This is when it was stock with headers on it. Because in 4th gear, I had 308 gears, and the car would go 146 or 7 miles an hour, but it was up in the 6,000 RPM range, and it didn't like running that RPM because the pump was cavitating. If you'd shift into 5th, which I did, and run less RPM, because then it was only at 4,200 or 4,300 indicated, then it would run all day and not overheat. With a Saab V4, that would be hard to run on the engine dyno, I think. Is it necessary to do the DoD delete on my Gen 4 LY5 when I swap it, or can I use the stock stuff for the swap stuff? You can run those lifters. You're obviously, it's not going to run in DoD unless you have all the factory harness and everything, and you're still doing that. The Saab V4 was a Ford motor. Did 5th gear slow the car down? No, it ran about the same speed in both of them. I would usually downshift because it's not a flat level ground the whole race is. There's lots of uphills and downhills and turns and stuff. And so if we were going uphill, I would go down into 4th. And then on downhills, we would go we'd go into 5th, to get all that extra speed. The problem is that on the Mustang, it went from a 1-to-1 to a 0.68. It was just terrible for it was a terrible split. It just didn't work out very well. It needed a different rear end gear for us, and then like a 1-to-1 and then a 0.9 or 0.85 or something. Sure, I need some advice. Why won't my 95 Mustang GT timing advance? That's a good question for Mark Sanchez, because you could go over what's going on with your factory harness and all that stuff, and he probably could tell you. I haven't run an Ecotech on the dyno, on the engine dyno. They've run a few of them over on the chassis dyno side. The Terminator X is an awful lot like the Holley HP and Dominator stuff that I run, so it works the same. Yeah, Jim, if you're talking about going to Bonneville, I'm trying to get my focus going on here. Here we go. For things like for top speed deals, you want the last shift to be the closest, because like at Bonneville, the issue below that is for us was just traction, and it is for a lot of guys. So you can't get full throttle. So you could have really wide splits in the lower gears, and it's not going to hurt you at all. And so the last one for us, or the last 2, if you have like a 6-speed or something, the last 2 shifts are the critical ones, because you need to rev it up, and when it falls back down during the shift, it still needs to be in the power band where it can still accelerate depending on what the shape of your curve looks like. So those are the critical things. Unfortunately for me, both the Mustang and the Honda that went pretty fast, especially the Honda, the shift from 4th to 5th gear was just terrible. Richard loves it when you say thoughts. Yeah, that's not my favorite thing. Are the Dodge V10s any good? The ones in the Vipers sure are. I think the Saab V4 was used in the Sonnet, if I remember right. There was a guy out at the Silver State that had a Saab Sonnet with a 289, an iron 289, hung out over the front axle or the center line of the wheels. Like, wow, that's pretty sporty of you. Yep, handling that could be best described as diabolical. FR 205 and Super Victor 351, how close are the runners out of the box? Close enough to where you should just bolt it on and run it. Guys who run LS fifth and a V16. That's for Bonneville. That's the transaxle that we ran, or the transmission that we ran. We ran an LS Trans, but I had a 4.0 gear made for it by the guys at Liberty Gear. I think are the guys that made it. It was. You took a look at it. It's pretty spindly. What is a better engine? There's no better engine. The number of cylinders in the engine are not going to dictate whether or not it's good. My 260 was light on the front end at 140. Mine has been that fast too. I had a cam and a different head and side drafts and header and stuff on it, and it would go 144 or 5, I think. But mine had the air dam, and I also put a skirt from the air dam basically down to the ground. It was just a rubber section, and with another kind of plasticky rubber piece backing, but not all the way down, so that a little bit could fold up if it was hitting stuff, which it did a lot. Oh, you had 2 Webers on it and a cam? Okay, I remember those, the downdrafts with the 2 manifolds on it. Wish Mopar was cheaper. Mopar guys, Ford original parts. Oh, pneumatic, you're doing a through-hole exhaust on the boat? Nice. Is it smart to bore out 5.3 like 10 thousandths over? I don't know what you mean by smart. Does it need it? If it needs to be bored out, and you want to put, and you need a new piston in it. If it's the walls are damaged or whatever, then yeah, you could do that. You can bore it out a lot more than that. We go to 3.905 from 3.780, so you have a lot of room for boring an iron 5.3. 2 more minutes. I have work to do. Did an engine swap in the boat. He wanted to keep the V6, so we put a 240 horsepower 4.3 liter. Oh, that's cool. Is that like a Mercury Marine version or something, or did you make it into that? The Trophy 4-cylinder will get boost. It'll get some kind of boost. The guys from TorqueStorm have offered up one of their blowers because they make a Pontiac blower that is for a Pontiac V8, and it all just bolts on. So that's possible, but it should also get a turbo, obviously. Because it's a cross flow head. The intake and the exhaust are on opposite sides, so it's just begging for a turbo over there. Regarding the water pump in your 5 liters, a particular design that works better for high RPM stuff. Yeah, I need to ask Mark that. I can't remember. We ran stuff in our World Challenge car, and I don't remember if it was Edelbrock. It's been a while. I don't know if we were clipping the impellers on those, because I think our problem was that we had too much speed, especially when we started running the motors up. Because on my 5 liter, we didn't run it very high. 6,000, 6,200. Did you find a 2.2 head? Yes, several, as a matter of fact. Mike, I just did a twin turbo through hull exhaust. Just use the big 4-inch hole saw on that. Duplicolor has 10 different old GM blue engine, all labeled GM blue. I know it's perfect. Usually they say Pontiac blue or Ford blue or whatever, but it make life a lot easier. Did you ever own a Datsun, like a 71 Fastback? Do you mean a 240Z? I have a 71 240Z, if that's what you mean. I don't know if David Visor had finished the 2.2 head yet or not. What do you think about a 2-liter Ecotech? They seem to work good. 320 horsepower and 400 foot-pounds. Why is the torque so much higher than the horsepower? I'm assuming that this is a turbo motor. Why is the torque so high on that? Is it an automatic or something? Richard has a 240 with a 260 engine. No. Glad I came across your channel. Well, I'm glad you guys showed up. Oh, a Datsun B210. Yeah, those are cool. Should we stop asking about Visor? I would tell you if there was an update on anything. If I got the head back and I had it here, we'd be looking at it and oohing and eyeing or flowing it or doing whatever. You know, but there's nothing I could do out on that end. Are you planning on riding an Edelbrock head on the Trophy? Yeah, Edelbrock heads are hard to find right now. Three and a half hole saw, good. RB25, that would be good for the 240. But judging by what 240s are worth now, it just needs to have a 240 engine in it, I think. Mike, you're going to be out. You're going to be here on the 29th. On the 29th, it's very likely that I'll be road tripping still, maybe. Carlo, you did your best pass. Congratulations, man. 2JZ swap. I'd rather do an RB in the 240. Ooh, an RX3. I like those. Yeah, Marvin. Yeah, Marvin passed away. That's too bad. Will tunnel port fit on the Trophy 4-cylinder? Yes, it will. Yeah, David's not doing great. Day to day, it's a tough thing. Yeah, the RX, the rotaries are money now. Everything is. It's just ridiculous. Except Trophy 4-cylinders that need to be rebuilt, which I have to go do right now. Thank you guys all for showing up. I've got to do the video. I'll get the video up in the morning on the on all the testing we did on the airflow test on all the super cool carburetors, and then hopefully Trophy 4 stuff tomorrow. I will see you guys all tomorrow. Oh, poll. Thanks for guys. You always got to remind me. Poll results: 58% are saying no, that it won't hit 150 horsepower. Wow. 42% saying yes. Took an ugly turn there. Just for that, I'm going to run a 100 shot on it.